Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes for Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I am your host. And on today's episode, we have a very special guest in Rebecca Rusch. And today, the topic is winter riding. Rebecca is a lifetime athlete. She's been an athlete for about 40 years, and she has done everything from rock climbing to rafting to bike packing, ultra endurance cycling. She has done it all, and she brings with her a wealth of knowledge. She's also a two-time winner of the Iditarod Trail Invitational, and she is the perfect guest to talk to us today about riding in cold weather. Today is a little bit different than what we typically do on the podcast. Usually we get to know the stories of the riders, but this is something new that Bikes for Death wants to be doing going forward, which is tackling topics. So this one today is on winter riding, and we have more topical series coming your way. But if you want to know more about Rebecca, I actually had her on the podcast in 2021, so you can check out that episode. It's episode 70, and we talk a lot more about Rebecca and her story. But again, today we're talking winter riding. We had an excellent chat. She has a wealth of experience and achievement. She has achieved so much in her 40 years, and she brings all of that knowledge to light today in today's podcast. But before we get into it, let's take a moment to thank the people that made it possible, starting with our latest batch of patrons. One cool thing about being a patron is you get access to the private Facebook group. I let you know what guests are coming up and give you an opportunity to ask questions. And on this topic in particular, we got a lot of feedback from our patrons, and a lot of our questions today came from them. So thank you very much for being part of today's discussion. And without further ado, let's thank our newest patrons, starting with Alish Zavaral and Johnny Napali. Thank y'all both for signing up to be sustaining members of the podcast. And if you would like to help produce these shows, you can find out more over at patreon.com/Bikes for Death. All right, today's episode is also brought to us by the Red Granite Grinder. You may remember that I did an episode on this race, and I actually went last year. Well, they're doing it again, and it's time for you to register. The Red Granite Grinder is on October 14th this year. And the thing that really sets this race apart from many of the other ones is all of the private land that they access. If I remember correctly, I believe he manages 24 different contacts with private landowners that you can only get access to during this event, which is a really cool thing. They have race links for everybody, starting with a 12-mile kid ride. They have a 30-mile non-competitive course, along with a competitive 50, 85, and 144-mile distances. And this year, Scotty Lechuga, who's been on the podcast a few times, is going to be there racing and signing up. She's also putting on a free gravel clinic on Thursday that is free to anybody that signs up for this event. They also have group rides for everybody on Thursday and Friday. And they have a beer release and concert in the downtown area on Friday evening. For more information and to register, head over to ironbull.org. You can find out all the information about the Red Granite Grinder, and you can also learn about a new event that they're putting on, the Midwest Bikepacking Summit, which is definitely worth checking out. And I am trying to be there myself, seeing if we can work it out so I can be there. If I am, I would love to see you there. So again, go over to ironbull.org to check it out and to register. And I hope to see you there. All right, everybody. Ching, ching, ching. The bills have been paid. And now it is time to get to my episode with Rebecca Rusch. I'm a huge fan, and I'm so glad that she was able to come on the podcast and share some nuggets of knowledge with us.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm so stoked to talk to you.
Oh, man. I'm more stoked.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thanks for doing this. It's nice it's definitely nice to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's been 73 episodes since we've had you on, so it's overdue.
Way to go. You were like doing podcasts before they were cool, you know?
At least bikepacking ones.
Yeah, exactly.
There were some other early adopters. I wish I picked it up even earlier. I wish I picked up podcasting back in the Eco Challenge days.
Yeah, no shit. Huh? You'd have so much cool content.
Yeah, that would be awesome. All right. Well, Rebecca Rusch, welcome back to the podcast. It's so great to have you back on the, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
It's an honor. My favorite podcast. I love it. Thanks for having me back. You said how many episodes since I've been here last?
Yeah, it's been 73 episodes. So you were on the podcast back on episode 70, and this one will be 143.
What did we talk about? I don't even remember.
We talked about a lot.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of stuff, and I was going to recommend to listeners that they go back and they listen to that one because we talked about your book. We talked about the Do Good Foundation. We talked about Eco Challenge. We talked about, Laos. Was it in Laos, that ride you did to honor your father?
Cool. Lots of good stuff.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of stuff, and that's a great for people who enjoy this episode or just enjoy the podcast. That's a great one to go back and listen to. And for people who don't know, I'm a huge Rebecca Rusch fan. You were actually one of the people who inspired me in my very early 20s to kind of wrap my head around what adventure sports is, what endurance athletes are, and really that was the thing. That was the thing that got me off of drugs and out of jail and on a healthier path. I mean, that was the thing that really was a springboard for me in my life. I watched. For anyone who doesn't know, like the Eco Challenge is an adventure race that was, I think it was 1995 to 2002, is around those years. And that was put on by Mark Burnett, who's now really well known for like Survivor and stuff. But it was billed as the world's toughest race. And I think by most standards, it probably lived up to its reputation. And it was a team sport, and you were on, what was the name of the team? You were probably on multiple teams, but you were on.
Yeah, I was the captain. Team Rubicon was like our sort of main name, but then it was Team Montreal. It was Team, depending on who the sponsor was, Team Pearl Izumi, Team, yeah.
Whoever would pay y'all to go get weird in the woods and do crazy shit. Yeah, so I mean that was my introduction to endurance sports, and I still to this day have all of the Eco Challenges on VHS tapes in my mom's house. I don't have a VHS player, but if I ever get one, I could go back and watch them. So you've been doing, adventure sports and been in the sport world for over 30 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe even 40. I mean, I got into sports in high school with cross country running, and then went to college. And really, after college, I found rock climbing, and that was kind of my first foray. And found rock climbing in Illinois, where I was living, and started dabbling and playing indoors and then outdoors. And then that inspired me to head west, put all my stuff in a car and go see what I could find. And yeah, that was a long time ago. That was, 90s.
Where was home before you moved out west?
I lived in Illinois, Chicago suburbs.
Oh, good.
But then, kind of took some time exploring climbing, ended up in Truckee, ended up in Southern California, and then about 20 years ago, ended up in Idaho, and that's where I stayed put. So when exploring, looking for, where to live.
Hey, it's a good way to do it. So we are going to be talking a lot about winter riding today. That's kind of the overall topic, and you're an excellent person to speak to this. And growing up in Chicago and now living in Idaho, I know that you're exposed to the cold on a regular basis. The fanboy in me, though, I have to ask a question about Eco Challenge. I'm curious, just as a fan. After, between 30 and 40 years of doing this, is Eco Challenge the world's toughest race? Or was it? I know it's no longer. Well, and then he brought it back for a 20-year anniversary, and now, but I mean, has that lived up to its reputation as being the world's toughest race?
Yes, I will say yes, because, and for those who aren't familiar, go back and watch some videos. It's pretty incredible. So because of a lot of factors, one, it's multi-sport. So you've got to ride, run, kayak, ride camels, whatever's thrown at you. So, jack of all trades, maybe master of none. Rock climbing is included. So you've got multi-sport, you've got team aspects. So you've got the team dynamics you're working with, and then they don't really tell you where to go. So you've got the navigational aspect. So you need to hit checkpoints along the way that might be 100 miles apart or whatever. So with all those things, you've got to have mastery of sport. You've got to have really good personal dynamics. You've got to be able to have a lot of intellectual thinking about, okay, we're lost. How do we get across this river? How do we build this boat, to get down this river? And then the clock never stops. So you also throw in sleep deprivation and massive, massive fatigue of events, that took 7 to 10 days to complete. And so all of that thrown together, it really is expedition racing. So it's really the package deal. And what's cool is with my cycling and bike packing is I really feel like I've come full circle, and I'm going back to those skills that I learned adventure racing, which are planning, navigation, pacing, sleeping, how to carry your stuff. I really feel like I'm coming back to those days with where my cycling is going right now, which is exploratory rides, adventure rides, self-supported type stuff. So it's kind of cool yeah. So I would say adventure racing, expedition racing was the toughest kind of racing I've done. But I'm going to put Iditarod and winter bike packing right up there with it. The only difference is I don't have to get in a kayak and put my bike on a kayak and something else. It's sort of single sport. So I guess in that way, it makes it a little easier, but it also makes it a little harder because I remember, doing expedition racing, you're sick of the bike section, but that a paddling section is coming up. So in some ways you got to sort of shift your focus, which was good for your brain and also good for your body, to get off the bike, start walking a little bit, give your butt a rest, give other body parts a rest. And so in some ways, long expedition cycling physically and mentally might be a little harder just because there's no break in the activity that you're doing, so to speak.
Yeah. At this stage in your career, how do you pick what trajectory you want to go on? I would have to assume you could probably do anything you want, how do you decide, is it just, I'm feeling this type of riding, or this is interesting me right now? How are you picking what you dive into?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, how I pick hasn't changed in 40 years of being an athlete. And I pick based on passion and curiosity, what makes my hands sweat, what I'm a little bit scared of. Those things are all, in our brain, those things are motivating. Curiosity is a powerful motivator. So basically if I'm I'm that little kid who camped in my backyard of what's over that next hill? Could I do it? And so I still pick based on that. And, I've had a lot of trajectories of being a rock climber, competing in paddling, adventure racing, and then morphing to cycling at age 38, getting specific in cycling. But even within cycling, it's I was doing 24-hour solo races and 100-milers and stage races, and now I'm really into bike packing and long distance expedition events or races. So even within that, I think that's the key to victory for anyone who, hopefully for me, movement is medicine, and I need to always be moving. So people were like, when are you going to retire? Never, I'm lucky enough I've been able to form a career out of this, but I would be doing this, even if it weren't my job. And so I really try to choose on passion. And, Leadville's a good example. I raced 6 or 7 years of the Leadville Trail 100. I won it 4 times, super satisfying. And there came a point where it was I've done everything I need to do here. I love that time period, but I'm going to move on. And that's where I started getting into more expedition riding and things like that. So I think it's important for anyone to choose with passion. And for me, I'm just that kid who wants to go see, what's around the next corner, and could my bike take me there?
Yeah, that's a great answer. Passion and curiosity. And I think that's definitely something that everyone can relate to. And I think it's really cool that you've been able to maintain that over a long period of your career, and that is your driving force. And that's something that everyone can relate to. So that is cool. I have no idea how to introduce you to my audience. So I decided, instead of me introducing you, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. How do you wrap up a 40-year career? Who is Rebecca Rusch, the athlete? Yeah, I'm going to leave the hard work to you. I'm just going to sit back and drink my coffee.
Put me on the spot. And I think it's an awesome question, because who are we defined as people? Are we defined by our job, what we're working on, what we do? And since my play and my work are combined, it's always a little hard to describe myself, but I'll just do brief. 7-time world champion, mountain bike Hall of Fame, gravel Hall of Fame. I've been an ultra endurance athlete my entire life, from running to rock climbing to adventure racing, and now cycling. I am the creator of the Be Good Foundation, which uses the bicycle as a catalyst for healing, empowerment, and evolution. I'm the founder of Rebecca's Private Idaho, a big gravel event. And really, I call myself an explorer more than an athlete, because yes, athlete is part of what I do. But I'm really using being in the outdoors to explore, both physically explore the world around me, but also explore who I am and what I'm capable of. So a lot of my mission and a lot of my work is, yes, to continually explore myself, but to also empower other people with wisdom or tools or learnings that I've had, so other people can go find the outdoors and find the magic in it. And so I love hearing that I inspired you to do that in your 20s. That's awesome. That's still my mission, is to keep getting myself outdoors, but also getting other people outdoors, because there's a lot of magic in it. And so yeah, I guess that's me, explorer and maybe share of wisdom and instigator of all sorts.
Well, I want, that's important. And I want to acknowledge and thank you for being willing to share your experience with my audience. There is a world of information that you have in your brain from experience. And we're going to be talking about winter riding today specifically. And I just appreciate you being willing to share this information, because, hopefully we want to get other people out there riding, and we don't want cold weather to be a reason not to go ride or not to go adventure and not to go explore. And it is meaningful. I know that a lot of people are going to be able to take this information and be able to go out and go farther than they would have. And so, yeah, I just appreciate your willingness. And that's something that I know of you as a person who wants to promulgate and find ways to help other people access the outdoors. And that's something I'm passionate about and I get excited about. And so I think it's worth recognizing your willingness to do that, because I know some people might want to keep that information close to their vest. You're training your competition here.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk a little winter riding. I think a good place to start, I have a list of questions, but let's talk about some of your personal experience with winter riding. I feel like the ITI, the Iditarod Trail Invitational, is probably a great place to start. Do you think so? It's got to be the pinnacle of.
Yeah, well, let's step back before that, because I will say winter riding and winter expedition riding is pretty new. It's kind of the newest evolution of sort of my experience cycling. And my friend Jay Peterberry, who is really the grandfather of all winter bike expeditions. I think he's won the Iditarod Trail Invitational 10 times. He lives in Idaho. He's a good friend, adventure racing friend. He's been poking me and trying to get me to do winter expeditions for a long time. And I just kept saying, no, I'm not good in the cold. I have Raynaud's, I have poor circulation, I have no desire, I'm not doing it. So for years, he was trying to push me to come to his event, the Fat Pursuit, which is a qualifier for the Iditarod Trail Invitational. He'd been pushing. And finally I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And, when we talk about what are driving forces, or motivators for us, fear, and curiosity, fear is a really big one. And so with Jay's prodding, I started to be curious about fat biking and just looking at it and being like, and knowing I actually needed a challenge. I needed something that scared me, and being outside in the winter, self-supported, really scared the hell out of me. And so I kind of accepted his prodding and went to his event, Fat Pursuit, and, basically got my feet wet, and learned, and started to learn. And that was only 5 or 6 years ago of starting to get involved with winter bike expeditions. Again, I needed a challenge after, a long time of being an athlete. I was scared of it. And there was an opportunity right there with a friend being like, I think you can do this. I think you have the right grit and attitude, but you just need to learn how to survive in the winter. And so it really was that. And what I thought was impossible, which was eventually getting myself to the Iditarod Trail Invitational, I thought that was impossible. But the journey's been really cool. I've done Iditarod Trail Invitational, the 350, the short one, I think 3 or 4 times. 3 or 4 times. I can't remember.
I know you won it twice. I know you won it in 2019 and 20.
So,
3 times.
Yeah, I won
okay.
It 3 times. Yeah.
I got 2019 and 2021.
No, I've won it twice. You're right. So the second year I went back, at a much better race, totally dialed and in control, but I didn't win that year, which is fine. And then the following year I went, and with my husband, we did it, without actually going inside and using the facility. So we really slept outside with a commitment. So I went from year 1, I was a blubbering mess and barely dragged myself to the finish line, even though I won. Year 2, I cleaned up my act, had a way better race, didn't win, but was way more proud of that achievement. And then year 3, I took it a step further and, didn't go into any of the shelters, didn't take the water that was available or the food that was available, and really just did our own thing with the ultimate goal of hopefully slowly building towards potentially doing the 1,000-mile, the full length, Iditarod Trail Invitational, which is a big daddy. It's, a month on the trail, self-supported, really living out in Alaska. But I never thought I would be able to do overnight self-supported things in winter temperatures, -40, -20, howling with the wolves. So that's kind of how I got involved. And, for anyone listening who's thinking about winter bike packing, I'm not suited for it. I get cold all the time. And there's so much equipment and learning and knowledge that really it's not the fastest, fittest person that wins. There's so much to the survival of it and the commitment of it, but it's very powerful to learn that you can survive in winter and ride your bike in winter. It's really cool. So that continues to be kind of, I don't have it mastered, I haven't done the long Iditarod yet, and it still really scares me. But I've learned a lot over the last 5 years, thanks to JP and a whole bunch of other people. You find bike packers are awesome people. And then you go further, winter bike packers are kind of even another breed that maybe, they like to howl at the wolves. And
another level of crazy.
A little bit more level of commitment, call it crazy, call it whatever you want. But yeah, so that's kind of my intro into winter bike packing, which is pretty recent.
Yeah, that's really valuable to understand with this conversation. What is it? Okay, and for the purpose of this conversation, I live in Texas, where if it gets below 40, everybody's freaking out, right? So my experience with winter riding is somewhat limited, and that either makes me a really good person to host this episode or a really poor person, but we'll find out. But winter riding and cold weather riding is scary. And even yourself, with all of your experience and all of the hard things you've done, even you put off winter riding, and fear was a motivator. It motivated you to not do it for a while. What is it about winter riding that is so scary and daunting to tackle?
Well, there's two things. One, it's the commitment level of being in really cold temperatures. And we all have been outside, and when you're moving, you're warm. And when you stop moving, you get cold really fast in cold temperatures. And then you also add into that an aerobic activity where you're often sweating, you're getting blood flow going. And so if you stop when you're sweaty, we all know what happens to water in cold temperatures is that it freezes. And so there are a lot of factors that add on instead of just like riding hard, getting your heart rate up, navigating, you're adding in the commitment of the cold and the elements. And truly, I believe that winter or not, that we're sort of guests in the outdoors and that Mother Nature has the ultimate say. So yeah, I mean, it's a primal fear of being cold. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes that feeling. Even getting out of your covers in the morning, you're like, oh, it's cold, and you want to put on a robe and a sweatshirt. So it's not a comfortable feeling for anyone. And so it's pretty normal that there is fear around it. But the cool thing is there's so much cool equipment. There's so much education. There's a way to actually manage the sweat, manage the cold temperatures, keep your feet warm. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with equipment and learning, but it's trial and error. You got to go out and see if it works for you. So again, that commitment level is something for people getting into winter riding. You don't start with the Iditarod Trail Invitational. You start with a 1 hour ride, in a place that you can go fat biking. To me though, you live in Texas, that I don't know, heat's gnarly. Like heat's almost harder to manage than cold sometimes because you can't, there's nothing you can do to remove the heat, and you can't remove the cold, but you put more layers on, or you get moving, or you do jumping jacks. Whereas if you're just dying hot, like doing the Arizona Trail one year, never been so hot. There's nothing I could do about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can layer up for winter, but yeah, it's a balancing act because when you're layering up, you can warm up, then you can sweat, then you could get cold, and that is kind of the dance of winter riding for sure. Let's get into some of the ins and outs. I've got a list of questions here. What is the weather like in Ketchum? So you live in Ketchum, Idaho. I know you mentioned you're living in Ketchum. So what's the weather like today in Ketchum, just for a point of reference, and how many months of winter do y'all have there?
And I actually live, 25, 30 miles north of Ketchum. So I'm outside of like the big city of Sun Valley. And we live in the mountains, and this morning it was, it was like 5 degrees, this morning. I think it might be about 15 now. I'm looking at snow right outside my window, and lots of skiing and fat biking to be had. And winter's probably, I don't know, really it's 6 months long, but not full on winter. Like it's already, the days are getting warmer. And what's really fascinating to find, and, my COO who moved here from Arkansas a couple of years ago, when she first moved to Idaho, she's like, thought 20 was really cold. But now she feels like 20 is really warm because you start to acclimatize to the situation, and you start to be like, oh, so when you're in it, there is acclimatization, just like, going to altitude or going to heat. When your body's in a situation for a while, you start to get used to that. So here in Idaho, like when it turns 40 in the spring, people are wearing t-shirts and, but in Texas, 40 is freezing. You're probably putting on booties and putting on,
everything,
all the clothes that you have. So yeah, it's an acclimatization, but the nice thing is we can all travel and get in or out of winter. And a lot of people do that here. It is a long winter, but it's also fabulous playground for a lot of really cool stuff.
We're the exact opposite. It's going to be like 80 degrees here, and we have instead of 6 months of winter, we have 6 months of summer. So I'll do the episode on riding in heat. We'll let you cover the one for riding in cold weather. What about your personal relationship with riding in cold weather? Maybe over the last 6 years, are you getting to where you like it more, you enjoy it more, you tolerate it more, or is it always a mental barrier to get out and ride in cold weather?
No, I actually love it. And I'm probably going to go fat biking today because one, the gear is set up, pogies on my handlebar, I've got, panniers on that I can stuff a puffy coat in. So I've pretty much learned that like the nice thing about a winter bike is there's a lot of space to throw layers in on. So, I would never ride without my pogies. I would never ride without my 45 North boots. So hands and feet, super important. And the rest of it, you're layering on and off. So yeah. And, I'll do a lot of my training, in the winter. I do a couple days indoors on Zwift or on the trainer, but then I want to go outside. And so, no, going on a 1, 2 hour, 4 hour ride around here is in the winter is just, I would treat it the same as I would do, a summer ride. I get excited about it. I check the conditions. I pack the stuff that I'm going to need for the weather that day. That said, if it's dumping down snow, I might go skiing instead of biking on that day. And so my personal relationship with fat biking is I love it. I'm really happy that I found it. That said, the big expeditions like Fat Pursuit or Iditarod Trail Invitational, that is a massive commitment. Like anyone who's training for a big event, I'm going to take that a little more seriously. And I'm still, intimidated by going overnight. I know I can do it. But it's still like you take it real seriously and you make sure all your gear works. You make sure your lights work, that you've got the batteries, because, that's the thing. If you're going and doing something big, or even a short ride on a fat bike, is the room for error is smaller. If you don't have a puffy coat with you and you get a flat tire and you start to freeze because you're just wearing your Lycra and like thin layers, but you have a mechanical, that becomes more serious than if you're doing that in 80-degree weather. So it's just sort of, I view it, my relationship with it is like, make sure your gear works and you've got the right stuff, because a mechanical or a biomechanical or something happening out there has a bigger consequence when it's cold.
Yeah, absolutely. You were almost right on my notes. My next question was, what do you think about riding in cold weather and poor conditions versus indoor riding on a trainer? I know me, man. I wuss out and I just hop on the trainer way too frequently during the winter. And I'd like to step out of that. And I'm sure many people would, because being outside, getting some UV rays and just being out in nature is a much better experience. But yeah, what are your thoughts on riding indoors versus riding outdoors in poor conditions?
Yeah, I mean, I do both in the winter, and there's definitely like riding indoors. It's like, I'm going to get the hour done. It's super efficient on a work day. I can do it in the morning before, office hours kind of stuff. So they're each a different. On the weekends, I want to be outside. I want to go exploring, so I kind of make my training day based on one, how much time I have, and two, I look at the forecast a lot more in the in the winter of like, oh, it's going to be really nice tomorrow. It's firm snow. It hasn't snowed in a while, so the trails will be good. I'm going to go fat biking. The nice thing is that backcountry skiing and fat biking are sort of alternate weather patterns. Like when it's snowing and powdery, I want to go skiing. When it's firm and hasn't snowed in a while, that's a good day to go fat biking. So kind of the same as I would choose, a ride in the summer. If it's pissing down rain, I might go for a hike instead of a bike ride.
Yeah.
I might be like, oh, I'm going to take a rest day and tomorrow looks good. I'm going to go tomorrow. So
Yeah.
It's the same thing, looking at the weather, looking at the wind, and even more than snow and precipitation, I look at the wind, because that's probably, in my opinion, one of the worst elements.
Yeah.
And especially fat biking, because wind does really suck the temperature down. It can blow the snow across the trail. So I've started to look at, I use some different weather apps, but I've started to use one that has wind on it, because it is kind of a factor.
Which one is that? Is that the Epic Weather Ride one?
No, it's Weather Underground. I use that one.
I use that one too. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you're in an event and it's snowing, windy, whatever, you just deal with it. So yeah.
You do. There's a good app. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's called Epic Weather Rides, and you can actually like upload a ride with GPS file. You can upload your route. You can say when you're going to start and how long you think it's going to take you, and it'll show you your weather for the entire route.
What?
Yeah,
oh, I'm so stoked. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's I just used it. I just did an ITT of a 400-mile route that I created here in Texas,
Nice.
and I had headwind going up and coming down. The wind was blowing south when I was going north, and it was blowing north when I was going south, and that then I knew it going into it. Which I don't know if it makes it better or not. Right? It's like you're gonna have to deal with it one way or another. So. But I think for like really inclement weather, absolutely knowing what you're going out into and having the proper gear and the proper mindset is extremely valuable. Speaking of mindset, the next question is how much of winter riding is mental toughness versus the right gear? And there's a quote, I'm going to share a quote that you gave. This was from bikepacking.com. And this was from an expedition that you did in Iceland with Gus. I think it's Gus Morton and Chris Burkard. Chris has been on the podcast a couple times. He's a great guy, and he loves his Iceland. So that was a pretty cool expedition. And your quote is, "Big expeditions like this require a big emotional toolbox, one that matches the amount of physical gear that you bring. You can't buy those tools. You have to earn them the hard way." And so, again, the question is how much of winter riding is mental toughness and how much of it is having the right gear?
Super good question. But yeah, gear and mindset, those are two mandatory pieces of equipment to develop. And, I'll go back to the story of Jay Peterberry, who knew me really well as an athlete, saying, you can do this. You don't have the gear or the experience in winter riding yet, but you have the mindset in spades from, being a lifelong ultra endurance athlete. And so, yeah, I actually would weight mindset over fitness and gear. Because you look at someone, John Stamstead is a really good example, like the original ultra endurance bike packer. He was doing the Iditarod Trail Invitational. They were doing that long before there were fat bikes, before there were pogies, before there was all this equipment. They were just like morphing regular mountain bikes and going out and riding in the snow. And they did it. And they carried Spam and, woolen long underwear and didn't have all the techie gear. And they still did it. And, now I'm doing, sort of modern winter bike packing with all this great equipment and fat bikes and 5-inch tires. And I'm blown away at what, the early adopters to riding on snow were able to do without the equipment that we have. And so mindset comes first, 100%. But with the right equipment, if you're new to this, you don't have 4 decades of ultra endurance experience. With the right gear, you start to develop the mindset of confidence and learning and knowing that, and that's what happened to me, in the last 5 years, knowing I can sleep out in minus 40-degree temperatures with no tent, just a little bivvy and a huge bag, and that I can survive. So the more you start to chip away with the gear and the experience, the more your mindset starts to build and grow. And I would say as you're getting into it, or even, if you've been into it for a long time, Jay's still away, your first mindset is survival. And absolutely you want to get out of your ride with all your fingers and toes in survival. And so I think that that's an important thing to take. When I went to fat biking, I came from this racer mentality, going fast, never stopping. And I really had to adjust at the different pace and how slowly one it is to ride on snow, but also how much time you need to stop to delayer, to put layers on, take layers off, put pressure into your tires, take pressure out of your tires. It's a slower pace, and that's just part of it. And so I really had to learn the mindset of patience and that my first goal is survival, and then the second goal is racing or finishing your ride or whatever. So I think going into it with a survival mindset is really important for people committing to stuff like this, and starting small. Starting with us 1 hour rides, going out on a friend on groomed Nordic trails where, you're starting to learn about tire pressure, and you're learning what do you want to wear when you're getting sweaty, when you're riding a fat bike. So you can learn that stuff on sort of safer terrain and a safer sort of playing ground. You're not going to jump into 100-mile fat bike race for your first experience. And no matter how fit you are, I would say don't do that. Go out and ride a little first and then work your way into it. Because the first time I went to do JP's event, my husband and I, we thought we had all the right gear, all that stuff. We went to do Fat Pursuit. We made it about 2 hours and then we quit because we were in over our heads. Our feet were freezing, even though we were like riding as fast as we could. And we both quit at different spots. And then we're texting each other. And I'm like, I'm only like a mile down the trail from you. I can't do it. It was minus 20 degrees and I wasn't prepared for it. So, and that's fine. I went back. I was like, okay, I need different boots. I need this. I need that. I need to practice a little more. So I was a little arrogant going in, not arrogant, but I'm like, I can ride 24 hours. That's how long that event takes. But
you're like, I'm tough. I've done hard things.
Tough. I got this. I can keep going. But I wasn't prepared for the elements. So I went back and, got some different stuff, asked some questions, learned some things, started riding around here a little bit more, and went back the next year. And I think I've won every year that I've gone, since that year. So learned a lot, and winning's not the goal. Again, I'm going to reiterate, surviving is the goal. And I didn't win every year. I dropped out one year because I had a respiratory issue. I was 10 miles from the finish, and I was close, but also was coughing up blood and just like, no, the point of this is survival. And people are like, why didn't you finish? It's like, because I didn't want to hurt my lungs any more than they were already hurt. So I did bail on that. So I think that that's an important thing when you're in committing environments, like snow and winter, is being okay with self-rescue, being okay with, not getting to whatever, sort of mandatory, whatever finish line you put out there. It really is kind of irrelevant. So ultimate goal, survival. And if you don't finish your first event or your first ride, you've learned something.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about coughing up blood for a second. Was that a result of riding in cold weather? And probably worth touching on. Yeah. What happened?
So when we talk about, learning from our failures, we learn a lot more when we screw up or when something goes wrong than when it's all, sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. So that event, I've always had some respiratory issues, like the racer cough. I mean, we've all kind of gotten that, but breathing in and out, cold weather really is tough on the lungs. And I really exacerbated that by going hard in cold weather. And so what I've learned from that now is I actually use a mouth, sort of mask called Cold Avenger. And so what it does, it's sort of like any sort of face mask, which is nice to cover your skin in cold weather. But this one has this nice soft plastic, like it looks like this little Darth Vader sort of breather thing. It looks really tough actually, but I wear that, in the cold, and I breathe through that thing, and it pre-warms the air you're exhaling is warm. And it doesn't get all wet like a buff because it's got that sort of soft plastic piece. So I wear that religiously when I'm doing long winter rides. I've also really focused on breathing in the last few years, and breathing techniques and nasal breathing. So we all know breathing in through your nose also pre-warms the air. It also keeps me at a pace where I'm not going too hard. And so I use a combination of a lot of nasal breathing and the Cold Avenger face mask for respiratory. And even if you don't have respiratory issues, a lot of people are getting coughs, getting sick, because they're just breathing freezing cold air. So that's a big thing to figure out.
I
is your
Googled that mask. That's gnarly. That's like it looks like post-apocalyptic type situation going on, but
yeah.
definitely that
It,
see that's a great tip and something I wouldn't even think of is regulating your breath to warm up your air and the potential damage that you're causing to your lungs. I mean, yeah, minus 40 degrees, you're just sucking in cold air.
yeah.
So yeah, that's really helpful. Uh, I assume you were okay after your coughing up blood incident. You just
Yeah, I was
rested and
okay,
recovered,
but
and
yeah, gave myself a pretty severe respiratory infection, and yeah, and so you end up, yeah, breathing in, and so, but I learned a lot. I learned, and basically, I thought I can't do this cold weather stuff. I just can't do it. It's not for me. I'm not cut out for it, and that's where again I talked to Jay, who's a real mentor, and he's like, try this mask, try this. Here's some stuff I do. And so in that failure, I learned, a strategy and some equipment that I really needed in order to be able to operate in cold
yeah,
weather.
yeah, that's a great tip. All right, here's another one. Here's a term that I hear frequently: be bold, start cold. True or false?
It depends on your intention. And so if you're an event and you're gunning for the win, yeah, yeah, start cold. You're going to warm up really fast. If you're going to compete or you're going to complete, those are two different things. And I'd say as you're new, go to complete because so many people go out too hard, they get sweaty, they don't have their equipment dialed, and they end up dropping out anyway. So look at what is your intention for the ride or event that you're doing. If you're going to complete, I might start a little cold because one, you are going to warm up, but I wouldn't be sitting there shivering, start comfortable and 10 minutes up the road, stop and take your jacket off, so that's why people say, starting cold is if you're really racing and you're trying to minimize that stop time, you're trying to minimize as many transitions as you can. But if you're trying to figure out what you're wearing, what's right for you in certain conditions, then start in whatever you're starting in and stop and take it off or put something else on a little bit later. So it really depends on your intention and how dialed in you are with what jacket you like to wear. Like I know if it's 20 degrees, I wear this and this. If it's 20 degrees and windy, I wear a different light windbreaker jacket. If it's, below zero, I wear this and this. So it's going to take you some time to figure out what are your favorite pieces and what works for you. So if you have the confidence and that, in 10 minutes, you're going to be warm because it's 20 degrees out and you're wearing your favorite 20 degree stuff, then that's fine. But if you're still learning, I spend a lot of time, taking things off, trying different combinations of this vest versus arm warmers versus that. So it really depends on the person and their intention.
One of the things I'm picking up on, I feel like this is going to just be an underlying theme is patience when winter riding. You're talking about stopping to, you need to regulate your body temperature. You need to make sure that you're surviving and you're taking care of yourself. It sounds like patience is a huge factor when you're riding in cold weather.
I love that you said that, and patience is definitely not, you can ask my husband or any of my other teammates, patience is not, my natural state of existence. And I really do feel like winter bike expeditions have taught me a lot of patience. And, you can like ride super hard and be, have too much tire pressure and digging a hole in the snow and put out a lot of energy going nowhere. And then someone will ride right by you with the right tire pressure and they're floating on top of the snow and they're chatting and they're not even sweating. And so it's definitely a situation of energy conservation and like riding. I'm like he or she who rides the easiest wins in the end.
Yeah.
If you can conserve the amount of energy by having right tire pressure, by not overheating, by eating one of the hardest things. So yeah, patience of the pace of it. And I'll just let everybody know, if you're flying, on a fat bike, you're going 5 miles an hour. Like averaging 5 miles an hour is really good. It's really fast. And anyone who rides in the summer would be like, what? So you have to wrap your head around the pace that is slower. The cool thing about slower pace is you see more. You see the grains of snow, just like walking versus riding, or being in a car versus being on a bike. The slower you go, the more you see. And you really have time to look at the mountains and all that. But just accepting that if you're averaging 5 miles an hour, you're crushing it. So don't get bummed out at yourself if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm only going 8 miles an hour, because that's kind of fast on a fat bike. But patience is really, really, really important. And acceptance of, if the snow's soft, the snow's, it's not good, it's not rideable. Okay, then you walk your bike. You walk your bike a lot while fat biking. And that's just part of it. And it's people not coming from bike expeditions. Well, if you're doing summer bike expeditions, you walk your bike up some of the hills because you're loaded and all that. But I was also surprised of like, oh, I'm just going to walk my bike. And even if you're going to win, you're walking your bike, even if you're at the front of the back.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but patience also with just a slower pace. Everything is slowed down. Your movements are slowed down because you're cold. I mean, everything is slower. All right, so here's an important question. Layering. In my mind, layering has got to be one of the more critical factors when riding in cold weather, because you don't want to sweat and get cold. And obviously you can only speak to your own experience with like your body and how to regulate your layering and your body temperature and stuff like that. But can you give some tips and some thoughts on how you personally manage layering and what that looks like?
Yeah, layering, you're spot on. Layering's really key for comfort, but also for survival. Because as we know, if you sweat in cold weather, it freezes and it's super dangerous. And I have the sort of unfortunate combination of getting really cold and not having a high tolerance in my body for cold, but also being a profuse sweater. So those two things put together are terrible for winter bike expeditions. And so my hands get sweaty all the time. My feet get sweaty all the time. So I've really had to be kind of really conscientious about the layering. And so, I mean, obviously you have to figure it out for yourself, trial and error, but I will say all the base layers are always wool, because those stay warm when wet. For hands and feet, I've got multiple layers. So if one gets wet, another dry one is available. You're drying a pair of gloves inside against your body if it gets wet, while you've got the other ones on. So you're moisture management all the time, of one, having options of base layers in case they get wet, and then drying them while you're riding. So that's a really, really important, is what is your base layer and what's your plan for if they get wet.
Oh, sorry. No, please go ahead. No, please go ahead.
No. What were you going to ask?
Okay. All right. I don't want you to lose your spot. No. Do you use First Light gear, like your wool undergarments or under?
Yeah, I use a lot of different brands, and here's where I'd say, look, it doesn't have to be a cycling brand. So, my long underwear I think they're Black Diamond, and because they're 3/4 length, and I really like 3/4 length, and those were the ones I found. My pants that I ride in, it's from a hunting company that makes wool, really active hunting gear. And so don't be, a lot of mountaineering gear, Nordic cross-country skiing gear. This hunting gear is for aerobic. So any aerobic activity in the outdoors, you can look at some of those brands, backcountry skiing. So you can look to some of those brands for some of your layering pieces. And so I've got sort of a hodgepodge. And the pants I love are First Light. I'm wearing a lot of different brands for layers. A lot of my other wool layers and my bike layers are Velocio. So of course you're bringing your bike shorts into the picture. A lot of the gloves I wear are Velocio, but it's a mix. It's a total mixed bag. So the other thing I was going to say about dressing and layering is, lots of thin layers is better than one gigantic big layer, because there aren't as many options. And we tend to want to, oh, it's 0 degrees, I want to put on the biggest, hugest gloves and jacket I can. Well, remember, we're moving and you've got blood flow and you're going to get warm. So it's always surprising that you could be in 10-degree weather and I might just be in my Velocio wool base layer and a vest, which is like, whoa, that's weird, but you're moving and working hard. So people tend to bring too thick of layers and bring too many. Of course, I always bring like a, just sort of an oh shit puffy coat layer, like I said, or if you have to stop, you have a mechanical. So you basically have your stop layer if you're going to sleep out or you have a mechanical or something. And then you have your moving layers that are, thinner, lighter, meant to be, added on top of each other. I will say with layering is you've got your base layers, that's wool, you've got some wind layers. Everything's got to fit on top of each other. And so as I get more toward the outer layer, I'm actually buying a bigger size than I would wear normally. And you're also often wearing a hydration pack. So as you get towards your outer layers, I'm typically a medium. I've got large in those so that I can make sure if I need to put everything on all together, and then the puffy coat, which is the outer layer, that can fit on over everything. The same thing with gloves. If you're like, I bring 3 or 4 layers of gloves instead of one big glove. I've got 2 thins, 1 medium, 1 thick, plus my pogies. So the thick ones are size extra large, so they can fit over everything with a hand warmer inside if needed. So you kind of think of yourself as you Michelin man out and build your layers. They've got all fit together. Yeah. It's like they fit like a puzzle and a Jenga sort of a thing. And then you could skip the middle one and put the top one on. So it is kind of a cool puzzle to figure out, but start with the base of wool and then just kind of look what you have in your closet. I guess I do that first before you go investing a whole bunch of money. And, the riding pants are a good example. The first hunting pants that I wear riding, I was looking and looking and looking for riding pants and trying ones and sending them back. And then I just went into my drawer and I'm like, I really love these pants. I love where the pockets are. They're made of wool. And I tried riding in them and I love them and they fit over my boots. So look in your closet first before you spend a lot of money and see what you've got from your other sports.
Yeah. I have, the reason I asked about First Light is I have over $3,000 worth of First Light gear. I mean, I have the entire layering system from their underwear all the way up to their biggest puffy jacket and pants but it's all designed for hunters, but it's great just outdoor gear. So yeah, it doesn't need to be specifically for cycling, just needs to be good outdoor cold weather gear. Absolutely. One question I had was, is you were talking about switching out socks or gloves, drying them out with your body temperature. I struggled the same. I run cold and my hands and feet are always sweaty. And so I struggle. And that's why I've spent so much money on cold weather gear, because I'm always fighting, trying to keep my extremities warm. So I have a couple questions here. One, when do you know, what is the indicator that you say, okay, I'm going to stop right now and switch out my socks or switch out my gloves? Let's start there.
Gloves all the time, because it's easy to manage. Taking a glove, take on, off. So you don't want your hands to sweat. Pogies are beautiful. Often I'm riding with no gloves, and pogies are these big sleeping bags that you put on your handlebars and you put your hands in them so that you can operate your shifting and your gears without having to have a gigantic glove on. So those are, that would be a first investment. I might suggest for someone. And so often I have no gloves on inside the pogies, because they're kind of warm like a sleeping bag anyway. So hand management, I'm taking gloves on and off constantly so that they're not sweating. And I just leave it in the pogie. It's just in there. So hands are easier to regulate. Socks take a little bit more because obviously then you got to take your gaiter off, your boot off, all your
Right.
stuff. So sock layering or changing would be one if my feet are starting to get cold and you're feeling like they're freezing, and that's an awareness of like, oh, okay, I should stop and change my socks. If I know my feet are sweaty, but I'm warm and I'm moving and I'm doing okay, might wait until I get to a shelter, or I'm going to go to sleep and I put dry socks on when I go to sleep. So that's a little bit more of a timing because you're taking your boots off. But absolutely, if you feel like you're freezing, that's the time to stop and change. Otherwise, if you're doing okay, but you're getting wet, but you've got a spare pair of socks, you might choose where you're going to do that change.
Yeah, interesting. I'd never even thought about warming up, like having an extra pair and warming one up while you're using the other one. So yeah, that's great. What about logistically with all these layers? Where are they going? How easily are you accessing them? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I pack sort of, and the good thing about a fat bike, we've got frame bags, we've got panniers, we've got a front roll. Usually even if I'm going out for a couple hour ride, I don't have the front roll on, but I've got my frame bag and my panniers just stay on there for the winter. So I can throw a jacket in there, I can throw water in there, and I don't have to set my bike up for every ride. But when I'm doing something that's serious and committed, I pack the bike really strategically, and I put the layers that either are for nighttime or I hope not to use very often. I pack those the deepest. So they're stuffed in somewhere, that, I can get to my puffy coat if I need it, if I have a mechanical, but it's maybe right on the end of my front roll, for example. So I know it's on the right side. I can just open that up and get it out if there's an emergency, but otherwise it's going to stay packed there for the day. Right in, more accessible, like right in the front of my frame bag might be my super, super light Velocio windbreaker that I can just throw on, off. And that's a really nice temperature regulator. And it's right at my fingertips. Like I don't even have to swing a leg back over the bike. I'll stop. I'm still straddling the bike. I can throw that jacket on. I can throw a hat or a face thing on. So I've got that stuff right at my fingertips. My gloves are always in my pogies again. So I don't even have to take a leg over the bike. I can change out my glove. I have to stop, but I can change out my gloves at any time. Sort of the medium layer, those are going to maybe be in my panniers, strapped right on the back, one zip, I could get to it. So you kind of think about how often will you use that piece of equipment. And if it's going to be on and off all day, then, it's right at your fingertips.
Yeah. What should be the expectation for warmth? If you manage all your layers correctly, if you got your system dialed, I have no idea. I'm genuinely curious. Like, do you get to a point where your feet and your hands and everything is warm and you're feeling good, or is everything kind of cold but it's tolerable? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And honestly, if you're not sweating and you're not cold, you're nailed the sweet spot.
Okay.
You're there. But I will say that changes, every hour, or, it might get windy. And so you're like, oh, I got to throw a jacket on. I feel a little chill. So if the ideal is that you've got this like nice little homeostasis of you're comfortable riding temperature, and it's totally doable. It works. So you're not sitting there freezing on the bike all the time. You're actually really comfortable, which is kind of awesome. And yeah, conditions are changing all the time. So again, that goes back to patience. If you feel a little chill, put a jacket on. If you start to sweat, you got to vent or, unzip or take a jacket off or whatever. So that's just kind of part of the deal.
Yeah. Are there tips and tricks that you've developed to like regulate your body temperature and stay, because obviously you don't want to get sweaty. I would assume you never want to get sweaty. You don't want that moisture. That's going to be hard to overcome. Are there tips and tricks that you've developed to kind of help manage and regulate your body temperature well?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to gear selection. So starting with wool and thinner base layers than you think you want. So even in, minus, below zero temperatures, I'm often just wearing a really, 100 thin weight wool long underwear and my First Light pants, and that's it. I've got puffy pants and rain pants and other things, but typically, I can go to pretty cold temperatures with just 2 thin layers on my lower body. So yeah, learning to maybe put some thinner layers on. And then also when you look for your layers, Velocio Apparel is one kind of cycling jacket that I really love because they have reverse zippers. So you can unzip from the bottom. And that's a great way to vent your torso and your body is a reverse zip jacket, because when you unzip from the top, then you've got this balloon effect. It's really awkward. And so that's one thing I really love. A feature I would look for in any jacket for winter riding is a reverse zip. Other strategies, again, patience of stopping and changing, and realizing that winter bike expeditions, this sort of figuring out of the gear is never finished. So, and Jay says this as well, is that, each event is different. I've got a few of my staple things that I know, the socks I like and this and that, but I'm always trying different vests, trying a different jacket, trying a different combination of things, because there's always new equipment being developed. Don't get frustrated if like what worked for you last year, then you don't like it anymore, or you blow that jacket out and you're like, I got to find a new one. Yeah.
One piece of gear that I have come to like for winter riding is a puffy vest.
Mm-hmm.
And I I just recently got one like last year for the first time, and the reason I got it is because of Lael. I always see Lael in a puffy vest, and I was like, "There's got to be something going on here." And I quickly learned that at least for the winter riding that I do, just regulating my core temperature, my arms don't get as cold, and it just kind of keeps me warm. And if I get too warm, I just unzip it, and then it's letting out some hot air and kind of cooling me down. Is a vest something you found to be useful? Is that a good piece of equipment?
Yeah, I use a vest. I don't use a puffy vest, but I've got a wind vest and then sort of a mid-layer vest. And exactly to your point, your core is, your survival. So keep your core warm. And a lot of times you're good to go. And often they pack smaller than something with sleeves. So you'll think again of your layering system as you build it. Probably should include a vest. Most people have a vest of some sort, whether it's puffy or another material, because it's just a nice way to add a layer without adding something with arms,
Yeah.
And the same I would think about with hoods, as you look at, everything I have doesn't need to have arms. Everything you have also doesn't need to have a hood. So like, your wind layer might have a hood, but your, mid layer doesn't have a hood, or vice versa. Because if you have like everything, you've got 14 hoods, then, it's a lot of bulk and it takes up space. So kind of think about those things because you're carrying all your stuff. So yes, you want to bring all the layers, but you want them to be packable and small and really do the job. You can always bring more stuff, but what happens then is you get sort of lost in your gear of like, where's that thing? And you have too many things. We do this with, and I teach Fat Camp with Jay, is we have everyone lay out their gear. And then, we're like, well, what didn't you use today? And can this substitute that? And can those two things together equal that piece? And so how can you edit and edit out things not so that you're cold, but so that you have what you need without a lot of overkill? And I think that's kind of the first mistake new riders make, and I still make too, because you're scared of being cold. And you pack your fears. So you're like, I'm scared of being cold. I'm bringing puffy pants and a puffy jacket and a fleece jacket and this jacket. And you just are taking your clothes for a bike ride instead of actually using them. And, that happens. But as you get better, start to edit and you'll have the confidence that you can get rid of some things.
Yeah. Yeah, the hoods is a good point. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, you don't want 14 layers, as you said, all with hoods. You got to figure out which. And I would even think, I'm curious to get your perspective on this, but I would even think like you could have one hood underneath your helmet and then a larger one that even went on top of your helmet, maybe. Is that a system that you use? Or
Yeah, everything's got to work together 100%. And so, yeah, if you can't fit a jacket over your helmet or over your layers, then that's not the right jacket.
Yeah. Let's talk about eating in cold weather and camp cooking. I don't even know if you do much cooking when you're doing like the ITI. What? But this is something I learned recently on a podcast is like people who like shiver or like constantly cold. They burn between like 500 and 2,500 extra calories per day. Just being cold is going to take a lot of caloric expenditure. So, what are you doing? What foods work well? How are you? How are you fueling your body in cold weather?
Yeah, it's a good point that, when you're shivering, you are burning more, and your body's just trying to keep warm. So that goes back to your layering. You don't want to be freezing cold while you're riding. You just don't want to be sweating. You want to be comfortable, but not sweating. Because again, then you're hopefully not burning as many calories. But I will say that first year of Iditarod, my big failure is I couldn't eat. The food I brought was either frozen or I didn't like it. I didn't have the patience to stop and eat. And I just dug myself into a hole I couldn't get out of. And I ended up finishing and winning, but only because of pure grit and the amount of experience I had to just push forward. But I had like the most epic bonk of all bonks because I was afraid to sleep outside and I wasn't eating well. So I came back from that and I did some research with GU and a nutritionist that works at GU. And, I learned how to eat just fine. It's sort of one of my superpowers in non-freezing cold bike weather. But I really failed on that in my first big winter bike expedition. And so I came home and was like, okay, you're looking at for food, you're looking at what has the most, a few things, what has, the most calories for the least amount of weight, and also, what is palatable and can be eaten while frozen, and also what's going to provide nutritional value. So you're looking at all those things: weight, calories, nutritional value, and can you eat it? And you're kind of scoring each food based on that. A GU gel, for example, is going to be frozen. And for 100 calories, it's a little heavy. So you're weighing that kind of stuff. A powder drink mix like GU, I use Roctane. I really love. That's super lightweight, can be carried on a bike. Add warm water to it, and you're going to get 250 calories for something that doesn't weigh a lot and is transportable. So I came home from that first big failure and kind of studied, which nuts have the most calories. And I started making, and what macro micronutrients, and I don't need to get too dorky into it. But also glycemic index, which is how long will a carbohydrate burn? Is it a stick or paper like you put on to start a fire, or is it a big log that's going to burn longer? And so you end up with a mix of those things. You need to try to eat more calories when you're cold. You're gonna not be able to consume the amount that you'll burn. But it needs to be palatable. So what I did is I ended up making a bunch of food and trying it at home, putting it in my freezer, making everything into little bite-sized balls. So one thing with a bar or anything, you try to go to bite it when it's frozen, you're going to break your teeth off. So everything gets segmented down into bite-sized pieces that you can throw in your mouth and keep riding, and sort of like melt it in your mouth for a while.
Yeah, you thaw it out while you're riding.
Yeah, totally. So I made a bunch of food. I've got a cookie recipe that's got a ton of calories, and I make them in little tiny balls. And then I also bacon is a lot of calories for very lightweight. So for Iditarod, I usually make up a bunch of bacon, and I put it all in Ziploc so you can segment, trying to eat a couple thousand calories per day, which is really hard to do, even though you might be burning 5,000. And so I break it all into like 400 calorie, I'm trying to get 200 to 400 calories an hour. And I break everything down into those kind of segments so that I don't have to think about it. I can just grab a baggie. It's got 4 slices of bacon. It's 400 calories. So I know I'm getting the nutrition that I need and the calories that I need on kind of a time lapse dropper sort of a schedule. So food's a big deal. You end up putting a lot of it on your body or in your pogies to warm the food. So it might go from your bag to your body, eventually to your mouth. So you've got this sort of flow of like, unfreezing your food in certain places. But I will say, we all know this kind of nutritional stuff, but when you're wearing a face mask and you've got to stop, like you can't eat while fat biking. You have to stop, put a foot down, get out some food, put it in your mouth, keep going. And that's just part of the patience process. And I wasn't patient that first year. And so I just kept riding, going, I'll eat later. And I got into real trouble and got really behind. And then you just don't feel like eating. And same, you've got a face mask. It's cold. You're just like, oh, so it's almost, you're choosing nutritionally, but you're also choosing what can you get in your mouth under your face mask and then like tuck it all back in so your face doesn't get frostbite.
It's such a pain.
It is a pain. It's hard. But here's where when I get frustrated, I don't want to stop to eat. I'm like, everybody has to stop to eat. So we're all on an equal playing field. And the people who don't stop to eat are going to bonk. And so I'm going to pass them anyway. So, I kind of like go through that in my head. Like, we all have to eat. We all have to go to the bathroom. We all have to melt water, we can drink water. So you do those things efficiently and then you're not put behind. So when you pack your food, you want to make sure it's right there, that you've got right on your handlebar. You've got, maybe 500 to 1,000 calories right there. So you've got maybe your food for the day. And then the next, when you stop to do something, you're going to move more food up to the front so that it's quick and easy to get at. You don't have to dig around in a bag. So the organization of your bike, your clothes, your food, your gear, and being kind of really specific about that's how you do well in the outdoors, because you minimize the stops, you minimize, messing around looking for your batteries, you minimize your exposure. Yeah, exactly.
You keep talking about how you put things on your chest, food and socks and gloves and everything. Do you have any kind of like pouch or anything that like holds it there? Or is it just your clothes that kind of keeps it all tight?
Yeah. That's actually really, really where the fun kind of gets going is actually sewing pockets and things into your inner layer. And so I wear a Revelate Designs Wham Pack that's like a water thing that, on my back, right over my base layer so that your water doesn't freeze. But then I sewed onto the front of it, Camelback Chase Vest, which is the straps have a whole bunch of pockets, a whole bunch of things. So I basically took 2 pieces of equipment, merged them together. So my hydration pack has a whole bunch of pockets on it. And so I can keep my phone, I can keep electronics, I can keep food in there. And then, my next layer jacket has inside pockets. So, if the piece you really love doesn't have pockets, sew them in, or you can find all sorts of those little attachment things, in various places. But that's where it gets kind of creative and fun, is how do you design a vest or what are you going to have to basically use your body as a warming machine, for your electronics and your food and your water and all your other stuff. And I know Jay he has a good seamstress. He alters a lot of his gear. And you're starting to see, gear that is designed for being outdoors is going to have really cool pocket configurations, just like those pants that we were talking about.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I love it. I love the DIY stuff. All right. Yeah. Water. You touched on it a little bit, but obviously, how do you keep hydrated and how do you keep your water from freezing? What do you do?
Well, I'm always wearing a hydration pack that's next to my body. And so the water in that, it's on your back. that's not going to freeze. What can freeze on that is the hose. So there's hose management of tucking it under your arm, keeping it inside your jacket. So yeah, every time you have to drink, you're unzipping, pulling that hose out, taking a drink, pushing the air backflow so that there's not water in the tube. That helps it. So you always want to blow the water back out of the tube into the main body. And then you put it back in your jacket. So that's kind of the management of that. And then I also carry a thermos that is for warm water, and that'll last a long time. I carry an insulated bottle. And so I'll have kind of a variety of ways that I'm drinking. And if I get to a place with hot water or I've melted snow and made water, I put that in the thermos and the insulated bottle. I drink those first because they're warm. They warm me from the inside. And they've got the insulating factor. And then I go to the hydration pack last because, you've got to unzip, get that thing into your mouth. But again, it's a process. It's a thing. Figure out, I've got the thermos and the water bottle right close at hand on my handlebars. With the insulated water bottle, it won't last long. I know that it's going to freeze, depending on the temperatures. Even though it's insulated, it's going to freeze, within an hour perhaps, or start to freeze. So that's why I drink that one first. A little tip with water bottles, if you've got them in your on your handlebar there, is turn them upside down, because the first place the bottle is going to try to freeze is in the drink mechanism. And so make sure it's closed. But if you turn that upside down, then it won't freeze as quickly. So that's another little tip for using water bottles outside. And a thermos, it's heavy, but it's going to keep water warm for a number of hours. And that's a really nice treat out on the trail to, again, mix in like a goo recovery drink and make a sort of a hot chocolate thing, or to mix in some soup or a tea. It's a really nice treat on the trail to have warm water, and it warms you from the inside. So if things are really serious, you've got to stop. You've got to do a mechanical. You're really getting cold. Warm water into the body is one of the first ways when you're stopped to help warm you from the inside out.
Yeah. So you talked about melting snow and warm water. Are you ever boiling snow and melting it that way?
Yeah. Yeah. So the last time I did the Iditarod, like I said, we elected, my husband and I, to really be self-supported. And so we didn't use the shelters or the places where they had hot water or even cold water. And so all of our water came from melting snow. So 3 times a day, basically, we had to stop trailside, pull out the stove, pull out the stuff, melt the snow, fill our hydration pack, fill all our bottles, and then put the stove away, do all that. And so and the reason we elected to do the last time I did the 350 that way is if I have the ultimate goal of going to Nome, which is 1,000 miles, I better be, and there's a lot less support, I better be adept at lighting my stove and melting snow for water and making sure I can handle that. So yeah, some of these races, a lot of these races, they have aid stations, and you're going to get water there. But you should always be capable and ready of melting snow and using the stove, because it's your safety net. If an emergency happens and you're not near one of those aid stations, you need to make warm water. You need to be able to get in your sleeping bag. And those are the things that I practice at home. I would ride out like a mile from my house and sleep out overnight. I slept in my backyard one time in the snow just to try my equipment. I literally went out on my deck, and I'm like, I'm going to sleep out tonight. It's 0. I'm going to see how this bag works and how I feel. And then I rode out and made a dehydrated meal for dinner just to practice with my stuff, to make sure that you don't want to be using that stuff or feel insecure about it during an emergency and be like, I can't get my stove lit. I can't get into my sleeping bag. So I practiced in my backyard a bunch.
I said that on the podcast so many times, whenever you're getting into anything, whether, it's bike packing or you want to go winter riding, go pack up your stuff right around the block, right around the neighborhood, and then sleep in your backyard. And if things
Yeah.
go bad, you can just go inside your house. But it's a great way to test your system, test your skills, and get acclimated to whatever the activity is that you're trying to do. And so I'm so glad you said that, because even the great Rebecca Rusch will sleep in her backyard, which is proof and point that we should all just test your stuff, build up to these things. Don't just go off and get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and trying it with a safety net is super important. You're like you said, you're in your backyard. If it's not working, you just go inside,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, what would I do differently next time? So yeah, operating with a safety net until you have the confidence to be without a safety net is really important.
Electronics, another thing that is doesn't perform well. Batteries don't last as long. I don't even know how well Garmin's work at -40. I mean, I have no idea. But what do you do to manage your electronics and make sure you don't, end up without lights or without your Garmin or whatever it is that you need?
Yeah, yeah, and I will say that batteries and technology are getting way better. They're lasting longer. Typically for navigation purposes, I've got 3 ways to navigate in case one of them, dies. So I've got, some sort of Garmin. Typically I'll use the eTrex because it has external batteries. So you can bring replacement batteries. If I'm not going to do that, then you've got a battery cache or, and you've planned out how long that's going to last. But for navigation, I'll have some sort of a digital, Garmin type thing. I'll have on my phone, which we all bring our phone to take pictures. On my phone, I'll also have the map of the course in maybe 1 or 2 different apps. And then I always have a paper map. I'm just old school and, like for Fat Pursuit, I have a paper map and I highlight the route and fold it up and put it in a Ziploc, and it's probably never comes out. But I always have that as it's lightweight. It's your ultimate safety net if all the digital stuff fails. So that's what I'm doing, for those things. For any batteries that you're carrying, know that even they don't last as long. You've got to use lithium batteries, first of all, if you're using replaceable batteries. And then anything that isn't in a device needs to be warm. So you're putting it next to your body or in your pogies for storage, your extra batteries. You might, if you've got extra hand warmers, you might put those around some of your batteries. But your body is the ultimate hand warmer, so finding ways to store stuff, again, it's a little bit of a Michelin man, but storing batteries and electronics on you or inside a jacket pocket, protected from the elements, is going to help them last longer because you're always managing that. Same with lights, and other things. And that's always when you're planning for something, you're, just like you're planning your food, how many hours I think it will take, how many nights will I be out? You kind of just don't know because condition dependent. If you're walking your bike 1 mile an hour, you might be out 3 times as long as you planned for. So Iditarod, for example, I've done that course 3 times. 1 year it took me 3.5 days. Another year it took me 8 days. Same course, different conditions. And so it's hard to plan for that kind of stuff and really manage like, how many batteries do I need? And then you start taking stock while you're out riding and turning the headlamp on low, or if it's a full moon and you don't need it, turn it off. You're always trying to, one, conserve your own energy, but conserve of your own battery yourself, but also conserve the energy of the electronics and the batteries that you have. If you don't need your Garmin on, turn it off. If you don't, and you're just saving those things. And I do a mix of sort of portable cache battery versus external batteries, especially for something like Iditarod. You're sending drops, food drops, 2 weeks in advance. You can have a little 5-pound thing and it can have food and batteries in it. And so, having devices that can take both, either be charged by a cache battery or take an external battery, that's kind of your safety net of if your cache battery runs out.
You know what I'm picturing as we're talking is the criminal looking sort of a guy with a big jacket. You go into town, he like opens his jacket and he's got like watches and coats and whatever, whatever he's selling. But that's what I'm picturing is just, I mean, you're going to have batteries and food and gloves, and it's all going to be around your body. And
Yeah.
you got to figure out a system of, getting it from your bike, putting it on your body, potentially eating it, or putting the battery in your garment, or whatever you need to do. But it's just this ever rotating cycle of gear that you're just always juggling, essentially.
Yeah, there's a lot of management, and that's where the organization, it takes a while to figure it out. You might tweak it each time here and there. But yeah, when you see people doing fat bike expeditions, they always look really big and fat because they've got a hydration pack. They look hunchback and fat because we've got all this stuff on underneath our clothes to keep it warm.
Yeah, it's funny. It's really helpful information. I think people are gonna, this is good stuff. Another piece of helpful information. Going potty. I mean, nobody wants to go to the bathroom whenever it's -40, but we all have to go to the bathroom. So any tips for managing that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has to go. It's maybe a little easier for guys to go number one than it is for women. But in your clothing selection, make sure you have stuff that you can pull down easily. I don't wear bib shorts when I'm doing winter bike expeditions because I don't want those straps. I want to be able to just pull my pants down. So that's part of the management. Make sure, it's not hard to pull your pants down. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal. It's sort of weird. You think you don't want to expose, your bits to the elements, but honestly, they don't get that cold. It's so weird. You pull your pants down and you're like, okay, that's not a big deal. And then you're done and you pull them back up. So, it's really not as big of a deal as it seems. Obviously if there's you're going to be in a place where there's an actual bathroom or whatever, always take advantage of that. Put on more chamois cream, make sure, just kind of take advantage of that. Even if you don't have to go, you do want to go off the trail. So that's just common courtesy etiquette. And, whether it's
I would assume, dig a hole first if you got to go number 2. Minimize
I mean, you're in snow, so ultimately that hole is gonna not really be down in the earth, but at least maybe it's if you can get it close to the ground and in a tree well or something like that, then that's great. But I'm not necessarily packing that stuff out. I am packing out my toilet paper. I'm packing out any stuff that, I bring an extra Ziploc that's for trash and things like that. So just because you put your toilet paper under the snow doesn't mean it's hidden, because when spring comes, there's going to be paper. So do take your own things out, but otherwise you just do your business. It's not that big of a deal. The one caveat I will say, you've got so many layers on and big boots and all that stuff. Make sure you don't pee on your pants or poop on your pants and your clothes, because often you're tired and you don't get them all the way down. So make sure you don't go on yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I have done that when I'm just too lazy and just like, one little trick that's kind of, useful is you're trying to step off the trail. So you're in deeper snow and you're sort of like hanging your butt out there. I'll lay my bike down on the edge of the trail and then I actually use my bike to hold on so I can lean back a little further. And then I use my bike to sort of pull myself back up. Because once you step off the trail, you're in deep snow and you don't so I put my bike there as like a little handrail sort of. And that works pretty well to make sure, one, you get your butt further off the trail and not over your pants.
Yeah, that's a great tip, because the snow's going to kind of anchor your bike down because it'll be plugged in the snow.
Heavy.
So
it's not going anywhere laying on its side. So it becomes this sort of, a handrail for you to hold on to. Pro tip.
Wonderful. This is like, I'm learning so much. This is great. I love it. I think maybe you could give some tips on what resources are available outside of this excellent podcast. But let's just say somebody wanted more tips. I think Jay's Fat Camp is probably a great one. What resources are out there that you think are valuable and people should seek out to help educate them and prepare them for cold weather riding?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I help teach the Fat Camp and Fat Pursuit training, and that is invaluable. And I volunteer to be an instructor every year because I learn so much each time going out and practicing. So that's one resource. I know that Iditarod Trail Invitational also does a winter camp that's accessible. So those are the things I know about where you can go practice. There's lots of short races. You know, we have some in Idaho. So I think that's a good way too, to sort of trial and error, but also meet a network of people perhaps in your area that are doing fat biking, that are doing rides. You know, in Idaho, we've got a couple fat bike races, and they're always really fun. And, you know, they're not long, 30K sort of a thing, 20K. So that's a resource that I would look for locally, wherever you live. And then, I mean, this kind of a podcast is great, and asking your friends and looking for articles. And often I'm like, if I see a picture of, you know, someone doing a fat bike race that I know is a really legit person, I'll zoom in on their gear and I actually like look at, you know, what did Jay wear? What light is he using?
Mm-hmm.
And because things are changing all the time, and the lights that I was using, you know, years ago, I'm changing it up now and going to, because I saw Jay had a different light. I'm like, oh, what's he using? So yeah, also just checking out what other people are doing.
Right.
It's a really great way, because it's a lot of stuff and it's a lot to research on your own and figure out from all these pieces of equipment. So you might as well mooch off of other people's knowledge and their blogs and, you know, their pictures and those kinds of things.
Absolutely. Why don't you plug so Fat Pursuit is the race, I believe, and Fat Camp is the precursor where Jay and you will teach a course on winter riding. Can you want to plug that so people can potentially join y'all on that?
Yeah, it's actually really cool. So there's three things. There's the Fat Pursuit workshop that's the week of Fat Pursuit. So you're actually like using so you're hopefully signed up for the race, and then the few days before you're really dialing things in, prepping, practicing sleeping outside. So anyone thinking of doing the Fat Pursuit workshop is awesome, because you basically like practice with all this stuff, hone it in, and then you go right into the event. And that's a 3-day workshop. The Fat Camp is longer. I think it's 7 days. And that's you go a little deeper. You don't have a race on the tail end of it, but you sleep more nights out. You go a little bit deeper into the theory and the practice. You're melting water. You're really going deeper in that one. And then he also has kind of this, I forget the name of it, but he has a more introductory, fat bike camp that is a little bit like glamping in a way, where you're still going to be out on the trail, you're still going to be practicing this stuff, but the camp and sort of the sleeping area is going to be set up for you. There's a little, food might be made for you instead of you having to make your own. So that's, if someone's done zero, winter bike expeditions, that might be a good place to start if you're really intimidated to sleep outside, or you just don't have, that kind of experience yet.
Instead of Fat Camp, you could call it Fat Glamp.
Well, it's called something, and I can't remember what it's called, but that's kind of a little more introductory for people who are getting going and they don't have everything, maybe as dialed in. So I love it. Again, I sign up as a volunteer because I learn a ton every time, and it's a chance for me to go through my own systems and practice myself before my races. So, and I'm always looking at everyone else's bike and looking at what socks they have and what stuff they have. So it's a great sharing opportunity too. And we have people that come to camp over and over again for the same reason. Even if you feel like you've taken it once, you've learned everything, it's just great to practice it again.
Yeah, absolutely. What's next for you? What's going on in your world? What are you training for right now?
Well, I have an ultimate goal of doing the Iditarod 1000 one of these years. I'm also what I'm working on. I'm really interested in some Idaho bike packing, and there is a trail here called the Idaho Centennial Trail that I've been ticking off. It's sort of a forgotten, defunct trail that goes the length of Idaho from Canada down to Nevada. So spending some time in my own backyard doing that kind of stuff. And I'm also working on some storytelling of I've been on the tail end, hopefully, of almost a year and a half of concussion recovery. And so I'm packaging up a lot of that information to be able to share with people, because I had a pretty big struggle this year of healing. And the Fat Pursuit this year was my, the first race back, really. So I'm working on sharing that story, again, kind of with the mission of helping other people who might have had a head injury and are struggling to heal from it. Yeah.
It's so topical. I got a concussion on February 3rd. Second one, actually. I got one when I was 16. But yeah, it was scary, and I didn't like it at all. How did you get a concussion?
I was bike packing. I was riding in Sedona area, doing the Coconino route, and just easy section of trail. I just clipped my handlebar on a rock and went flying down a ravine, and had to self-rescue and do all this stuff. And so that's been quite a journey, and the healing has been really challenging. So, I'm working on storytelling, and providing resources to help other folks who are going down that road to recovery.
Yeah. I mean, it's dangerous out there, and obviously we try to mitigate as much of the danger as possible, but knowing how to deal with injury whenever it happens is important. And injury is the worst, right? It's like, there's nothing you can do about it other than like just like whatever your body needs. You just have to listen to your body, and it just sucks. Injuries are no fun.
Back to that patience thing. Yeah.
Maybe that could be the next podcast, is dealing with injury and recovery and stuff.
The other stuff I'm working on, obviously Rebecca's Private Idaho, that's coming up year number 11. And that's in September. And I do have a training camp that I do. It's digital, online community. So with my coach, Tim Cusick, and it's an 8-week training camp, whether you're coming to RPI or you're training for long bike rides. That starts in July. Registration's open now. So that's a fun way to glean information. And, we share training tips, gear, all that kind of stuff. You get a customized training program from my coach. So that's, RPI Base Camp is open for registration right now. So if somebody wants to ride and train with me for gravel and summer events, you can find that on my website.
Yeah, summer's coming up in Texas. We're in spring already, so it's kind of funny to be doing this episode on winter riding. But still, how much more winter do y'all have in Idaho?
Oh, a lot. I mean, I'm looking at, we got a snow stake outside in our driveway, and it's marked at 4 feet right now. So we have 4 feet of snow still on the ground.
And I know Wisconsin just held their Berkey, the big ski race that they have, and I know that was just like this past week or 2 weeks ago. And so there's a lot of winter still going around. It's just not here in Texas, but I know that there's a lot of people who will be able to take advantage of this information. The cool thing about an episode like this is that winter riding is always winter riding, and so this would be a resource that people can come back and visit from year to year, which I think is awesome. Anything we didn't cover that you feel like we should have before we put a bow on it?
No, that was really fun. I just, invite people to join me, either with Base Camp or any of the other stuff I've got going on. You can find me on my website, because as we said at the beginning of the episode, part of my mission is to share and get people stoked and outdoors riding. So it's just an invitation to come along.
I love that. And I'll echo that. I mean, unless we did like a 10-hour podcast, you just can't replace that one-on-one, like training or just advice and tips and stuff that you can get through, the opportunities that you have for people to join you and to train with you and to learn from you and from Jay, who's another just he's well known as, for his winter riding. He's just a great all around athlete, but his winter riding has been pretty spectacular as well. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing some tidbits. I learned a ton. This was very helpful, and I won't get to use any of it till probably next year. But next year I'll have a good resource to go back on.
Well, you can come to Idaho. There's still 4 feet of snow on the ground, so we could go for a ride. You motivated me.
Don't make me. Oh shoot, a ride with Rebecca Rusch. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I could handle that. I'm such a fanboy. It's so funny. I've interviewed some big people, but you're legitimately one of the people that set me on this path, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the examples that you set. And so it's an honor to talk to you. I appreciate your willingness to come and chat with me, and really again for being able to share some of these things that you've learned over 4 decades of riding. I mean, that information is invaluable, and like you said in your quote. You can't buy those tools. You have to earn them the hard way. And you've definitely done that. I appreciate you sharing some of those tips and tricks with the audience today.
Well, thank you for passing it on too, and doing this podcast and getting more people stoked and educated and empowered to get out there. It's awesome.
Absolutely. Go ride your damn bike, right? That's what it's all about. Well, next time I'm in Idaho, I'm going to take you up on that ride. I might want to do it during the summer, though.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. It's been a pleasure.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody. That is it for today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope that you learned as much as I did. And I hope that you're feeling a little bit more prepared to go out and face some harsher climates, some colder climates, and get out there and ride your damn bike. All right, well, we are ramping up over here at Bikes for Death headquarters. Next weekend is the East Texas Showdown. We have 210 people descending upon East Texas from all over the world, and we are scrambling to get ready and prepared for you wonderful people. If you're not going to be there this year, make sure to follow the East Texas Showdown Instagram page. We are going to be providing some awesome content for you to follow along as you watch some dots, so be on the lookout for that. And until next week, you know what to do. Go ride your damn bike.